He was 23 when he first saw her, and the world stopped turning. It was the autumn of 1369. The royal court had moved to Santrum because the plague was prowling Lisbon again, and the Ribatejo nights were thick with the smell of orange blossom and fear. King Fernando rode in from the hunt, still wearing mud-spattered leather, his golden hair plastered to his forehead, laughing at some falconer's joke. Then he stepped into the great hall of the palace and the laughter died in his throat. Leonor Teles de Menezes stood by the hearth talking to her husband, João Lourenço de Cunha, one of Fernando's own household knights. She wore a gown the color of fresh blood, cut daringly low for a married woman, and when she turned to greet the king the firelight caught the red in her hair and turned it into living flame. Chroniclers who hated her later swore her eyes were green as poisoned emeralds. Chroniclers who secretly desired her said they were the color of the sea after a storm. Either way, Fernando looked once and was lost. He did not speak that night. He simply stared until Leonor felt the weight of his gaze, lifted her chin and met it without flinching. In that single exchange an entire kingdom was silently auctioned. Fernando was no innocent boy. He had already buried one wife, Constanca, daughter of the Duke of Valencia de Don Juan, who had died trying to give him an heir. He had fought Castile, signed treaties, broken treaties, and knew the taste of power. But from the moment he saw Leonor he became someone else, reckless, blind, half-mad with wanting. He began finding excuses to summon her husband to court, then kept the man drinking until dawn while he slipped away to walk beneath Leonor's windows. He sent her gifts no queen had ever received: Arabian horses, falcons with silver bells, a necklace of rubies shaped like drops of blood. When her husband dared complain, Fernando had him flogged in the palace courtyard for insolence to the crown. By 1371 the whole kingdom knew. Nobles muttered that the king had been bewitched. Priests thundered from pulpits that Leonor was a second Jezebel. In the taverns of Lisbon they sang filthy songs about the Galician whore who rides the king better than his horse. Leonor heard every verse and smiled, because she knew something the singers did not. Fernando was hers now, body and throne. The divorce was brutal in its simplicity. Fernando summoned the Archbishop of Braga and told him, calmly, that João Lourenço de Cunha's marriage had never been valid. Some forgotten cousinship, a technicality no one had noticed in 8 years. When the Archbishop hesitated, Fernando reminded him who paid for cathedrals. The decree of annulment was signed before Easter 1372. Cunha was given a choice: accept a fat pension and vanish to his estates or lose his head. He chose the pension and was never seen at court again. On May 5, 1372, in the little monastery of Lica do Bailio near Porto, far from prying eyes, Fernando married Leonor in a ceremony so secret that only 7 people witnessed it. The monk who performed it was shaking so hard he dropped the ring twice. Leonor wore cloth of gold that cost more than the yearly taxes of Alentejo. Fernando could not take his eyes off her. When the final vow was spoken he kissed her in front of the altar like a man dying of thirst who has found water. Outside, the bells rang once, then fell silent as if Portugal itself was holding its breath. Castile reacted exactly as Leonor had predicted. King Henry II of Trastamara sent letters to every court in Europe declaring the marriage adulterous and the new queen a public concubine. He demanded Fernando set her aside or face war. Fernando laughed, tore the letters in half and declared war first. The First Fernandine War lasted 2 years and bled Portugal white. Castilian armies ravaged the Alentejo, burned the suburbs of Lisbon, and came within sight of the royal palace. Fernando fought like a lion, but every victory cost more than the kingdom could pay. In the end he bought peace by promising his infant daughter Beatriz in marriage to one of Henry's sons. Leonor stood behind the throne the day the treaty was signed, fingers resting lightly on Fernando's shoulder, and smiled at the Castilian ambassadors as if she had won. Henry died in 1379. His son when I was younger, hungrier, and remembered every insult. In 1381 he sent word that the old betrothal was void because Portugal had broken faith. Fernando, now 35 and coughing blood into silk handkerchiefs, knew he was running out of time. He had no legitimate son. Beatriz was his only child. If he died, the nobles would tear the kingdom apart fighting over the succession. and Leonor would lose everything. So he did the one thing no Portuguese king had ever done. In the dead of night, in a hunting lodge at Salvaterra de Mugos surrounded by marshes and mist, he met secretly with Castilian envoys. Leonor was there, wrapped in black velvet, the only Portuguese noble in the room. One by one the 7 seals were pressed into red wax. The Treaty of Salvaterra de Mugos. If Fernando died without a male heir, Beatriz would marry one eye of Castile's son, and the 2 crowns would be joined forever. Portugal would become a province of Castile. The document was hidden inside a hollowed-out prayer book and carried back to Toledo before any Portuguese counselor even knew it existed. Fernando returned to Lisbon pale and shaking. He told Leonor, "Now you will never lose your crown." She kissed the blood from his lips and said nothing. He lasted another 2 years. On October 22, 1383 he died in the royal bedchamber with Leonor holding his hand and the archbishop refusing him absolution unless he burned the treaty. Fernando whispered that he was too tired, closed his eyes and slipped away. He was 37 years old. The kingdom went into official mourning, but in the streets people were already sharpening knives. Leonor moved fast. She declared herself regent for 10-year-old Beatriz, dismissed every minister who opposed her, and began negotiating with one eye of Castile exactly as the secret treaty demanded. In April 1384 she signed a new agreement. Beatriz would marry Juan's son and Castilian troops would protect Lisbon until the wedding. On December 6, 1384 the gates of the capital opened at dawn and the Castilian army rode in. Their banners already showed the combined arms of both kingdoms. For 3 days Portugal ceased to exist. Then the people decided they preferred revolution to extinction. It began with a whisper in the Alfama district. The master of Avis, João, illegitimate son of Fernando's father, was gathering men in the north. It became a shout when a crowd dragged Leonor's chief minister, the Count of Aurum, from his horse and cut his throat in front of the cathedral. It turned into a roar when Lisbon rose as one city, barricaded the streets with overturned carts, and hanged every Galician they could catch from the lampposts. Leonor fled the palace with Beatriz and a single chest of jewels, galloping north under Castilian escort. In Santrum she tried to rally support, but the castle gates stayed shut. She crossed the border into Castile and never saw Portugal again. She spent the last 20 years of her life in a Valladolid convent, still beautiful, still hated, still signing her letters Queen of Portugal, while the nuns spat when she passed. On August 14, 1385, on the field of Aljubarrota, a Portuguese army 1/3 the size of the Castilian host shattered the invaders so completely that for 600 years no foreign army ever again marched on Lisbon. The Treaty of Salvaterra was publicly burned in the Ratio Square. Beatriz was locked away in a Castilian castle until she died childless. The master of Avis became King João I and founded a dynasty that would one day rule half the world. But if you walk the cloister of Lica do Bailio at twilight, when the swallows are diving and the stone is still warm from the sun, you can find a carving no guidebook mentions. A woman's profile with long waving hair and a tiny crown almost worn away by centuries of fingers tracing it. Old women in the village say that on the anniversary of the secret wedding you can sometimes smell orange blossom on air that should smell only of the sea. They say Leonor still waits for the man who loved her enough to sell a kingdom, and that Portugal only survived because, in the end, even love wasn't quite strong enough to kill it. Some thrones fall to armies. Portugal almost fell to a single kiss in a candlelit monastery. And somewhere, in the dark between two countries that learned to hate the same woman, her ghost still counts the cost of one night that lasted 7 centuries. Fade to black over the sound of waves against the cliffs of Lica do Bailio and a woman's laughter carried on the wind.